Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. You guys are sending me a whole bunch of questions, so I appreciate it. So keep sending them in, and I keep giving you answers. So the question that this video is going to answer is MPLS multicast, basically running your or extending multicast through the service provider fabric. Now, this is a service provider thing. Unless you're running your own MPLS environment, you're probably never going to do this, but knowing this will help you in terms of talking to your service provider. So I'm going to talk about the Cisco way. I'm not going to talk about Juniper or any other vendor. I'm just going to talk about the Cisco way. So we have MPLS and multicast. Okay. So basically, what we got is you have a CE down here, and let's say you're just running multicast down here somewhere. So MCAS is down here, right? And then it's connecting to your service provider's PE. You have the PE cloud. So this is the service provider network. And you wanted to pop out, let's say you have another PE somewhere else. And then you have your CE. And you have multicast coming down here. So what you're trying to do now is let me put some extensions in this here. What you're trying to do is get multicast to come up here to the CE, go through the PE, go through the provider network, come out the other PE down to the CE and down to the other end. Why would you do this? Because probably over here somewhere you have something that's, serving up some kind of video, right? Some type of video or something. All right. So you want to go from here up, and you have people over here that are receivers that want to receive that video broadcast. And you're running MPLS, right? You got MPLS from your service provider. So the service provider can do this. Now, from a Cisco standpoint, there are a ton of profiles. They call them, multicast profiles, right? That you can run. Now, I'm only going to go over maybe 5. So we got profile 0, we got 1, 3, 11, and 13. All right. But there's a whole lot more than that, but some of them are not supported by the Cisco platform. So the old one here is profile 0, which is the traditional MDT, right? So MDT stands for multicast distribution tree. And this is actually the AFI, sub AFI in here. So it'll be IPv4 MDT, right? Everything else, I don't want to use yellow. Everything else here is going to use another AFI, sub AFI of IPv4 and VPN. That's basically what this is, multicast VPN. Okay. Now, the difference between this is some of these are going to be GRE based, some of these are going to be MLDP based. Now, MLDP is an extension of LDP that allows you to do multicast. The difference between the two is MLDP is ingress replication, because what you're going to have to do is, let's say you have 2 PE routers or whatever in here, you're going to have to say this is the root of the MLDP root. Let me put MLDP root, right? And what's going to happen is when it gets a label, right? When the label comes in for multicast on MLDP, it will get sent to one of these roots, and then the roots will ingress replicate to whatever PE. Let's say we got a PE over here, right? We got another PE over here and another PE over here. Now, depending on who's your root, it's going to ingress replicate to each one of these PEs, right? So let's say the traffic came over here. I should use yellow. For some reason, yellow didn't work. So it comes over here, and then it gets, ingress replicated or IR to each individual PE, right? That's when you use MLDP. When you use GRE base, you're going to have PIM over GRE, right? So you're going to actually form tunnels on all the PE GRE tunnels, and then you're going to be sending your multicast traffic over that PIM, right? Now, you're going to have PIM in 2 different, or multicast running in 2 different locations. When you use MLDP, your core network does not run PIM. You don't need to because you're using that extension of MLDP. When you are running the GRE base, you have to run multicast in the service provider network. So that's the pros and cons of running GRE base versus MLDP based multicast. Now, what you will see though is in the GRE base, you're going to have your GRE tunnel, and in the MLDP base, you're going to have this thing called a LSP virtual interface. So those are two things that you're going to see that's different when you're trying to run the show IP PIM VRF, whatever the VRF is, neighbor command, and then you want to see your PIM neighbors. So the other thing that you're going to have to worry about here is state. Again, state, if you're a multicast in service provider network, you want to reduce the state, you're going to have to, use MLDP. If you don't care about state information, just use GRE. What else is there? Because that was pretty quick for an explanation of multicast. Now, the one thing you do have to realize is that everybody has to join this tree. There's a couple other things that you have to worry about here, right? So here's some more acronyms for you. So you got PMSI, Provider Multicast Interface. That's the MDT. Everybody joins that. Then you got SPMSI, which is selective, right? So that means if you're going to do this under the VRF and you join the MDT group and then you send traffic, it goes to the selective ones, whoever joined that group, right? And then you have partition PMSI, which is a whole different flavor. But most of the time, you're going to be using SPMSI or PMSI. If you're on the default, right, this is where you have this thing called a data MDT, right? So you have your traditional default MDT, and then you have your data MDT. Now, your data MDT is going to happen if you go over a certain amount of traffic, right? So if you go over a certain threshold, it will now go on to the selective or the data MDT, and that just gets created every time. So when you see the configurations, when I do a lab on this and show you the configurations, I'll show you the default MDT, and I'll show you the data MDT configurations of, hey, if you had a threshold of 5 megs and it went over 5 megs, then it will go on to the data MDT. All right, so I'll go data MDT now. So data MDT, and that would go to its selective group. So let's say over here and over here, all right, for that group, if you were joining that group. Again, you have MLDP base. That I always get tongue-tied with that, in GRE base. Now, the key difference here is if you're going to do the GRE based, you're not only going to have multicast in the service provider network running, but you're also going to have it in the VRF. So you would have to do your traditional MP multicast routing command, and then you would have to do MP multicast routing VRF, whatever the name is, right? Now, if you do that, it will run multicast in the VRF and in the service provider. So when you're looking at your show, when you do your show IP mroute command, you'll see, your S comma G's, right? And your S comma G's will eventually happen when you start sending that traffic. Now, there is another thing that's involved in this multicast, which is you can have, BGP carry that. Now, if BGP carries the state information, then you're going to have a bunch of routes in your route table. So now you have to learn, and I'll give you just 2 of them. So 6 is going to be your, I may get this wrong. So 6 is going to be your star comma G tree, which is your shared tree, and then 7 is going to be your S comma G tree, which is your shortest path tree, right? And once you get on your shortest path tree, you're just going to go directly. Now, if you need to know about multicast, I did do a quick video on multicast about the S comma G and the star comma G, the purpose, what biter is, why if you're using biter, you can move up and down the tree, stuff like that. If you want me to make a more detailed video about multicast, I'll do that as well. But you need to know multicast before you even start talking about multicast and MPLS. You at least need to know what the basic functions of multicast is. what the rules of multicast is, what the RPF check is, what is, again, with star comma G, with S comma G, what BIDR is, the static assignment, auto RP, which rarely anybody uses, or BSR, which is bootstrap router. In this situation here, you're better off using BSR, because if you use auto RP, now you got to do sparse dense mode, because sparse dense mode doesn't work with auto RP, because you have your mapping agent and your RP announcements. So those run on two different multicast addresses. You need dense mode to actually push that out. So it's just an extra configuration that you just do not need in the real world. Now, in the Cisco exam, they may tell you to configure it with auto RP, but in the real world, most of the time you're using BSR. But once you know that, now it's easy to understand multicast in a service provider, because it's really just taking the same concepts and just moving into the service provider network. Now, from a configuration standpoint, it's a little bit different, because you now have to configure it under the VRF. And once you know how to configure it under the VRF, in the service provider network, for the most part, you're going to be running SSM anyway, right? So, and this is real world configuration. You're going to be running SSM in the real world. So when you're running source specific multicast, now you're running a totally different multicast scheme, and it works perfectly fine there. It'll make more sense in the lab when I show you with SSM, and the whole point, because there's no point of having an RP in the service provider network, really. Now, somebody might hear this and say, yes, we need RPs. But again, if you're doing source specific multicast, you know the source and the group. That's the whole point of source specific multicast. Now, in normal source specific multicast, if you're learning this, they're going to tell you use IGMP version 3. But remember, IGMP version 3 is a layer 2 protocol, and PIM is still a layer 3. So this was a brief, hopefully this answered that question to the person that asked for it. The main points here that you need to remember is, from a PECE standpoint, it's going to be running in the VRF. You have two styles, which is going to be GRE or MLDP. MLDP is an extension of LDP. You're going to have to now specify the route when you use MLDP. If you use MLDP, you do not have to have PIM running in the core. If you use GRE base, you will need to have PIM running in the core. You're probably going to use source specific multicast or SSM in the core to accommodate this. And then you have your default tree, and then you have your data tree. And the data tree actually spawns if you go over the threshold for your default tree. The profiles that normally Cisco is going to test you on are that you're going to see profile 0, which is your traditional MDT, AFI, sub AFI, and then 1, 3, 11, and 13 are going to be using these AFI, sub AFI, IPv4, and VPN. Let me stop right here, because I know I said AFI, sub AFI. So that's address family identifier, sub address family identifier. So what that looks like is IPv4 is the AFI. That's the main thing, right? Sub AFI is NVPN, okay? So it's the same thing. VPN v4, unicast. Your VPN v4 is the AFI, sub AFI is unicast. So if you hear somebody telling you, hey, what's the AFI, sub AFI of, MPLS IPv4, then you should know what that is, right? Hopefully this video is informative. Again, I'm going to do a lab on this to show you a little bit more details. I'm not going to do profile 0, because that's an older version that nobody really uses anymore. So I'm going to I may do a whole series. I'll start off with 1, and then we'll get to 11 and 3, because, before I forget, there is one concept you need to understand here. There is customer PIM, provider PIM. And that is right here. So PE down is CPIM, customer PIM, right? This is what you're going to tunnel over to the other side, right? So this is CPIM right here. From provider to PE is PPIM, which is provider PIM, okay? So provider PIM. So you are not extending customer PIM into provider PIM. It's not called customer PIM when it hits the provider network. It's customer PIM up to the PE. Then once it gets from the PE, it's provider PIM all the way to the other PE, and then it comes out, and now it's customer PIM again. Okay. So again, hope this video is informative. Look out for the labs. If that person that was in the comments still want a little bit more details, you can send me an email and I can explain it a little bit more. This is Don from Padlock Technologies. Thank you and have a nice day. Don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe.